Thanks for coming along, Ryan.
My pleasure, Rob.
Tell us about chainsaws, how to look after them and yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I thought today I'd go through first safety equipment when using a chainsaw, parts of the chainsaw, how to sharpen the chainsaw, of course, with maintenance, and how to use it, and some of the ways you can use a chainsaw in conservation and restoration work.
Right, good. And what's your background?
I'm a landscaper and a landscape gardener, and I specialise in revegetation work. I did my training at the Botanic Gardens and actually spent a bit of time in the army. That's where I first learnt to use my chainsaw. Did a lot of courses there for clearing bits and pieces, and so I just I've done a lot of chainsaw work before. So.
Okay.
Right, okay then, we'll go through the first bits, and that's the safety equipment. This is a pretty obvious one. It's good sturdy footwear, and with the steel toe is top priority.
So the old Kiwi jandal's not the thing to use?
No, definitely not, and I know a lot of people would use them like that, and that is not the right safety equipment to use when dealing with such a dangerous bit of machinery. So here you've always got to make sure that they're all worn properly, of course done up, and good serviceable footwear. So we've got one, safety boots, and number two is your helmet.
Carson, we're just going to close the door.
Okay.
That's very good.
Yep. Thanks.
Let's start with the boots again.
Okay, sure.
Where do you want to start? No?
The boots.
Right. Right, okay, so first is the safety boot. Want to make sure that they've got good, decent soles on them. Steel toes, of course, and they have to be worn properly, and they're in good working order.
Right, so the good old Kiwi jandal's not the thing to do with...
No, because, as I say, when you've got your chainsaw going, and they can cut through some pretty sharp stuff very quickly. So, the idea is to keep yourself well protected, and make sure that your balance and footing's right. So that's the safety shoes or safety boots. Second item is a helmet. You've got your visor. That's to stop any wood chips or sawdust flying through into your face, and as well as the bar as well, because that's definitely not a thing that you want to do or have done to you. Grade 5 earmuffs, because the chainsaws are quite loud, over 120 decibels, and also typical is make sure it's serviceable, works well, and that it fits properly. That's about it for the head protection.
So that was a grade 5 EMF. You don't want anything less than that?
Well, you can do, but if you're operating a chainsaw, as I say, you can get helmets that have grade 4 and 3, but I prefer to make sure that you're well protected. You can actually get inserts to make them higher grade than that as well. Right. So, especially if you're on a chainsaw day after day or doing a lot of clearing, that you want to make sure that your ear's right, because you don't want to go home and then next thing you can't hear what they're saying. So, so that's the head protection. Another one which is just as important as anything else is chainsaw chaps or trousers. I've got both versions here. These are chainsaw chaps. Fit around the waist, buckle them up, and these ones have got the zips. And so that's a chainsaw chap or chaps. And these are chainsaw trousers. I prefer to use these because it's easy to manoeuvre around when you're using them. Same thing, but they're a bit lighter at the back, so you can manoeuvre yourself more. And what they are, Rob, is inside here it's all full of fiberglass. So if you slip and your bar hits your leg, you actually got all the fibres here of the glass actually clog up the chain, and it just stops instantly within a second, split second. So just pretty much instantaneously it'll stop your chain from turning around, and hence stop cutting your leg. So
if you've got your finger on the trigger and you slip over and you happen to hit your leg, these here will actually stop the chain.
Yep, that's what they're designed to do. Yep, they are designed to stop the chain instantaneously once it comes up with all the fibres, because there's thousands of fibres in here, and it clogs them up. I've seen a demonstration of how it works. So they're very, very good equipment.
Well, it's certainly well worth having, isn't it? Because there's been some pretty horrendous accidents with chainsaws that don't make a nice clean cut.
No, and that's when I was at the City Council, and I was sent to do a chainsaw certification course, and that was first thing in the morning. We went through all the safety procedures when using a chainsaw, and then just before lunch, they show us slide shots of chainsaw mishaps, and it does put you off your lunch because there was some horrific accidents. It's quite disturbing actually. So and it happens, it still happens, and it's still going to happen if people don't use chainsaws properly. So you've got to make sure that you've got all the safety equipment. And other than that, I could recommend, some people like to use leather skin gloves or pigskin gloves, just to stop from scratching from branches and stuff like that. Or I just sometimes wear gardening gloves with the rubber palms and the sort of cotton tops. Because even picking up branches can be tight, and you want as much distance from you as possible from the chainsaw or from your body. So other than that, gloves, there's nothing really else. I don't really recommend wearing safety goggles, because you get quite hot using a chainsaw and they can fog up. Some people do. You can get anti-fog goggles, but generally your visor's good.
And it really is important to wear this gear, isn't it? Because we all think we're pretty great, but we can all make a mistake. We can all trip over a branch, or put your foot down a rabbit or rat hole or something, and if you haven't got that gear, as you say, some pretty nasty injuries with those things.
Yeah, that's right. And when you're working together, I've had an incident where we were clearing an old forest for revegetation, and a rather large tree was dropped, and when it fell, it left a branch in an adjacent tree, and I walked past and it fell on my head, but I was lucky I was wearing my helmet, and it was a large branch. It was thicker than my arm, and it knocked me down to the ground, and I was seeing stars. But if I hadn't worn that, it would have done some serious damage. So, which it's called a widowmaker, which is if I hadn't been wearing the helmet, that would have severely damaged my head. So so it's not just a chainsaw, it's the environment you're working in as well. So if you fall over and if you're walking along the trunk and you're limbing it up, then and you fall off, then you land on your head. You've still got your helmet to protect you, because it's got a cradle inside to just to protect yourself. Yep, that's it. So, and they only last relatively, I think, about 5 years, and then you are meant to replace them through
and that's probably
safety procedure.
Quite an important point to get to, isn't it? We're all a bit slack about buying this sort of gear, because it's the same. People get a boat and spend a fortune on a boat, and they won't go and buy a life jacket or a EPIRB or something. And this sort of gear is very similar, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
And you look at that and you say, it's only a bit of plastic, but as you say, from your experience, it can make the difference.
Yep. And I've actually seen accidents where they've actually, people hadn't worn those, and chainsaws have been embedded in skulls and stuff like that. So, and it does pay, if you've got it, is wear it, because that's another thing too. People become too complacent and they don't wear the safety equipment, even if they've got it. Sits in the back of their ute, or sits in their truck, or or sit in their shed, and they think, I'm only going to use it for 5 seconds. But I do, even if I'm just using it for 5 seconds, I still put on all my safety equipment, because that's the 5 seconds that generally is where something goes wrong.
That's when it will happen, and I'm afraid as Kiwis we are a bit bad at things like that, aren't we? We're pretty bit gung-ho with some of these things.
Yep, definitely. So so that's the safety equipment. Now we'll get on to the machine itself. Okay, it's actually a relatively small saw, power saw or chainsaw. Generally you find most of them are 2-stroke, which is fuel oil mix. The first thing you do with a chainsaw, before we go to the parts is you check for its serviceability. In other words, just make sure that it's got all the bits and pieces on it, the bar and the chain. This is for the cover for the bar, and that's another essential part too, because even carrying these around, and once you sharpen those, they are razor sharp and you can cut yourself. So, yep, the bar guard's very important. Make sure it's got all its fuel caps, front's the oil, and that's to lubricate the bar, because when your chain's turning around it does get very warm. Your fuel, it's a fuel mix, so it's a 2-stroke. You've got your air filters in here, and you've got your handle, and make sure all the switches are working properly. You always make sure you check those. This is called an immersion bar, and it's a safety design that when you are using a saw sometimes, and it's revving away and you're cutting and you hit something like a knot in a piece of wood, it'll grab and then it can flick, and it's spring loaded, so if it does that, it's inertia action, and it'll automatically lock, and that'll stop the chain straight away. So just in case it can fly up and hit you on the shoulder or on your head. So
those things happen quite quickly, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, occasionally myself been whizzing away, and next thing the thing just jumps up.
Yeah, no, they can do too, especially when after you start going through your chain, through sharpening it, and you get down to smaller teeth, they can jump a bit more too. So as I say, make sure it's serviceable, doesn't leak petrol or anything like that, because they can, if you drop your chainsaw when you're using it, you can get a hole in the tank. So general serviceability for that. Right. Just make sure that it's serviceable. Right. Next we go on to maintenance of the saw itself. Right. So we've got the saw. I'll just bring out some more tools. Right. Paintbrush, flat file, and then you've got files. Right, so most of the covers these days come with a what they call a combo tool. That is set so you can undo all the nuts, and it's got a flat head screwdriver for all the screws. Right, so I'll pull it apart. That. Another thing too is you always should make sure that the nuts, if you take the front nut off, generally with the bar you've got 2 nuts. The front one's goes back onto the front one.
All right.
It's just something. It's just to do with the thread and stuff. There we go. To cover. You see it's dirty, so we can give it a clean. They're called Tors and plugs, and just another thing to help with the oil. If I take the bar and chain off, and I mentioned before, is that the oil, that's for the bar lubrication, because it gets hot, and here's where it comes out. It's a little injector, and that squirts it into the bar. And with the chainsaw, its revolutions, it does, with the chain, it does get quite hot. Right, so if I give it, paintbrush is to, so it gets a bit messy, so you've got to make sure it's all clean. That's another good thing about this flathead, is it's good for getting all the corners. Yep, and gets into all the gaps. Have a good clean.
And how often should you do that? Give it a good clean.
Well, you should, every time you use a chainsaw, you should clean it. That's the rule of thumb. Sharpening, it depends, of course, on how often you use it. Sometimes you can use a chainsaw all day without, if you can sharpen it properly. all day without having to resharpen it. And of course, it depends what sort of wood you're cutting as well. If you're clearing some of the hardwoods, stuff like eucalyptus and stuff like that, then you might be looking at cleaning it, sharpening it about 2 or 3 times in a day. So that's the mode of cleaning.
In there with the bar and the drive for the chain, are there any critical things in there to keep your eye on?
Yeah, you're right there, Rob. There's this is obviously the sprocket that drives the chain. As I say, that's another good thing when you clean it too, because you check for serviceability inside the machinery or the machine, and you just checked it to see all the sprockets are okay there, the bearings are fine, and it's got all its clips on, C-clips. And most modern chainsaws these days have a chain adjustment screw, so you can adjust it, because the older ones, and it's got a little point that it sits on there, and that moves the bar backwards and forwards, because after a while they do stretch a wee bit with the heat and tension and torque that they have to go through, so that's for adjusting that. So you just check to see all the plugs are all serviceable and everything's all right there. It's working okay, so that's pretty rough, and that's all clean as well. Give it a quick cloud over. So, as I say, you just go through and make sure it's not cracked, or it's going to. Last thing you want to do is be cutting through something and you hadn't realised it's got a crack and it's going to fall apart on you, because this is a chain guard, and that makes you more exposed to chain because it's quite close to your person. Yeah. So, sorry about the mess. I'll clean it up. So, and paintbrush is quite handy. Well, any thick bristle brush is quite good for giving them a good clean.
And would you normally use any solvent, or just give it a good dry brush?
No, because as I say, you're using a lot of oil to keep this machine in the bar cool, so it gets dirty anyway. Like as soon as you start it up, it's going to be dirty again, and you start cutting through things. So so that's what you do, and so that's clean. Now, a lot of people realise too, sort of the sharpening end, this is in the business end of the chainsaw, that you sharpen the chain, but a lot of people don't realise that the amount of pressure that the bar's under, it actually gets burred on the edges.
Right.
So of course you check for serviceability as well, it's all working okay. And you get a flat file and you file down the burrs, or else it causes friction on the chain. It can cause the chain to snap, which you don't want, because last thing you want is a chain snapping off and flying around near your person. So file those flat, and this chain this bar is well used, but it's still got a bit of life in it. It's actually about halfway through its life.
And what sort of things on the bar would you be looking at which would make you think that it's time to replace it?
Generally, you look at, you've got these, this is the other sprocket, this is the return sprocket on the bar, and it's attached with 4 plugs, and when they start getting really worn, it's getting close. It's, you see they become really prominent and they get really burred, and but it turns out, as I say, it turns okay and it's not jammed. But generally, my bars, when I replace them, there's no paint left on there at all, and it's just totally clear. And you can see with the heat too that it's left a lot of heat there from. So. And
do they actually wear in the groove much at all? Or chain wear instead?
Well, that's another thing that can happen. It's a possibility that it can get caught in there. Like if you've got this, you're cutting dirty wood. If it's got soil all over it, and you get a dirty chain in it, and it gets in there. Just make sure that's all nice and flush again. Just run it over. You don't need to pay too much attention to it. So you can hear it there. So that's the bar. I get my other equipment out of this. This is just a file pouch. You've got, this is a gauge, depth gauge for the chain. That's a file guide, let you attach your files to. And you've got your files. These are round files, so that's a broken one. No, that was broken. But yeah, and you have to make sure that when you go to a chainsaw shop that you get the right size for your chain, because different size chainsaws have different chains. There's your handle, and this is another little machine for clearing out nooks and crannies when you're sharpening and cleaning your saw. And this goes in this recess here, and you'd be quite surprised at how dirty it does get in there, you see.
Quite amazing, isn't it, how much is in there?
So, yeah, with your chain turning around, that can cause it to come off and cause you grief. But with your chain gun on, it will just generally come off. It won't fly off and injure anybody. So, yeah, so you make that sure that's clean. So that's that. So we've got that right now. So we've given it a pretty good clean. It's not too bad. You could spend longer and be quite detailed, but I'd be happy with that if I was using it on a day-to-day basis. And so now we'll put it back together again. Got to make sure that. Another thing with the bar too is that you rotate your bar. They go on both ways.
Oh, right. Yep.
Upside down. You see the stickers there. So
it doesn't matter to put it on upside down.
No, and you can have it that way. So if you can remember what time you had it on last before you pull it apart, then you just rotate it, and it's just so it gets even wear. So,
yep.
So yeah. So you drape it over the top. Whoops. Yeah. Drape it over the top.
I guess it's pretty important to have the teeth facing the right way.
Yes, I must admit I've put them together before, and people have been watching me, and I've been telling them how to use a chainsaw, and I go to start it up and it's on the wrong way. That's quite embarrassing. It's happened before. Hopefully it won't happen again. Sometimes it does, but yeah, it's one of those things. So that goes there. The teeth point towards the front, and hook it onto the back, or the sprocket from the motor, and you just have to adjust a few things here because, as I say, it's got a chain tensioner, and you've got to make sure it sits on that point like it has, and it's that there, and then you just tension it. See the chain tightening and the bars coming into position, and
how tight should you have the chain?
You should have it so you can just move the teeth a wee bit like that. So if you have it,
would you want to see light through there or not that much?
Yeah, no, you want to see light through there because, as I say, a lot of thing with heat, if you have it too tight, it's going to affect the chain coming around and actually moving. If you have it too loose, it's just going to come off once you hit your timber that you're cutting with. So yeah, so just make sure it's nice and tight to the right tension.
And if you're doing quite a big job with it, would you alter the tension with the heat during your work? Would that require you to alter the tension, or once you've got it like this, it's fine for your job, is it?
Yeah, generally it's fine. But as I say, yeah, depending on what sort of timber you're cutting, if it's hardwood, they can stretch, and sometimes they do need readjusting and sharpening. And if you get a lot of knotty wood, or sometimes even the best chainsaw operator can go too far with the chainsaw and cut into the ground and hit stones, and then you've got to look at, you could even break teeth off your chainsaw, or sometimes you're cutting a tree down and it's had wire through it. It used to be a strainer post, and that can affect your chain as well. So yeah, you've got to look into those sorts of things as well. So yeah, so we put your chain cover back on. The front one.
Front nut on the front.
Front nut on the front one. And yeah, see that's still a bit loose, so I'll just give it another sharpen, another tighten. Yeah, that's a bit better.
So that's reasonably tight, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. You always do the back one up first.
Alright.
And that's... Actually, it's a bit too tight. I'm going to have to loosen this off and put it on again. It's a bit fiddly. And
Probably better to spend a wee bit of time at this stage and get it right though before you start.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll just, because that's the main thing. It's not much fun to start your chainsaw up and then find out that it's not on properly. So if we take that off again, and redo it. Yeah, just wasn't quite in place properly. Right. Back. Now it's to loosen that off. You always got to treat your chainsaw that it's dangerous, because even not tightening up these, if you slip and hit some of the teeth on this chain, it'll do some damage. Yep, so that's not too bad. See, that's 2 knot free now.
I imagine it wouldn't do your knuckles a lot of good.
No, it's very sharp. So that's cleaning the chainsaw. Right, okay, onto the sharpening. Get your files, round file, make sure it's clean. You've got your file guide. On here you've got different degrees to which you sharpen your chain. Fits in here like so. Just screw that a wee bit. And you've got your handle for holding it. But I might prefer not to use this. I know how to sharpen the chain, so that's an easier way, but I feel more comfortable not doing it. Most people would prefer to do that, especially if you're starting off. On each individual chain there's a line going through there.
Oh yeah, see that.
And that's, you sharpen parallel with that.
Oh right. So does that correspond to one of those angles on the guide, does it?
No, it doesn't, because it does, the 30 degree one it does, but 25 and 35 is different. Some timbers that you cut need different sorts of sharpening, so so it's free, so you put your inertial bar on, chain's locked, won't move. Start off, and you get it square. Depending on how blunt it is, sometimes it only needs 2 or 3. And another thing is when you are using your chainsaw, sometimes they do get burred a bit, so that gives you a chance to straighten it up. Right. 2, 3. So, and you just check to see where you've made the circuits. So it's nice, and there you can actually see the
it's all nice and shiny all the way
shiny
through.
in through there, and it's nice and sharp.
No misbit.
It's actually quite sharp. You wouldn't want to push it too far through there. So that's the teeth. This is a depth gauge, and a lot of people don't realise too, and they sharpen their chains and then they wonder why it's not cutting. And the other teeth, these are actually called rakers, and this depth gauge here, if you put it on there, and you can see it's not showing there, this is deeper.
Right.
And what you do, you get your flat file again, and you go over that, and you file those, and that actually helps when you're lowering it. It actually helps it's called a raker. It'll grab grab and then, because that's the grabber and that's the cutter.
Oh, right. Yeah,
And
so it sort of feeds the tooth in.
yeah, so make sure you go over those as well. So with the gauge to make sure they're all right. So pretty much you go around all the chain and make sure they're all filed down as well. And so they actually have to be below the cutting tooth. So that's that. So we've gone through everything.
Now, with my own chainsaw, Ryan, after a period of time I've been sharpening it for a while, I started to end up cutting in a curve, and obviously that's something to do with the way I'm sharpening it.
Yeah.
What causes that?
Well, generally it is, when you're not parallel with your teeth.
Right.
Or again, it can be because your rakers aren't low enough.
Right.
But generally, rakers not low enough is if you're cutting like that, is generally because it's not.
And if it's consistently
sharp
curving one way, is that perhaps maybe there's more effort going into sharpening the teeth on one side than the other, or something like that?
Because if you had if you were running too long, then it would cut and turn the way that it's long. So that's pretty much the pros and cons. It's pretty much it really. Is just generally you've got to make sure that it runs parallel with your teeth. And as I say, you can get your chains practically right down. You can get them pretty, half of that size of steel news chains down to about there.
Right.
Yeah, they're fine. So because they're expensive and you don't want to replace your chain. There's other. I know shops where you can get these serviced. They actually have a machine that it just sits on a vise, and you just bring it. It's got like a little circular wheel, and they bring it down and sharpen them. A lot of people at Arborists use those. You get ones that you can plug into your lighter. You can get little vices that you put on tree stumps to hold it in place. So but that's just the general way of hand sharpening your chainsaw. So so that's pretty much it for sharpening. Few sort of things with using your chainsaw. When the bar's off and you're moving around the area that you sharpen, you always carry it behind you like that, because you don't want to carry it with the bar exposed in front of you. And if you fall over, of course your first instinct is to put your hand down, because your hand could go through it. Even if it's turned off, it's preferable that you carry it that way. Another thing is too, you always got to make sure you've got relatively tight fitting clothing, not loose, and you want to be wearing a big long scarf, of course, when you're operating a chainsaw. And other things, always know your limits, because there's a lot of torque in these chainsaws, and if you use one for quite a while, you get pretty sore arms and you get cramped up, and you can get yourself in a mess of trouble. So you always got to make sure that you just work to your ability. Another tip is, and this is a very major one, is when you're actually cutting with a chainsaw, you've got to make sure you never stand over your bar. In other words, you don't stand over like that, because, as I say, if it flicks back, you're in the way.
Your nose gone.
Yeah, so you always stand like that. Another one is you never operate a chainsaw over your head, or it shouldn't be over your shoulders really. So if you're cutting, you have it like that, and then that's when you become unstable. So you've always got to make sure that your chainsaw is nice and easy and comfortable for you to use. So.
And what about from? Sometimes you see guys cutting from underneath a log.
Okay, yeah. So in that instance too, you've got to watch out for the ground. You don't want to hit the ground and start flicking stones up, because that can snap your chain. Because when if you're cross-cutting a log, so you've got a big log and it's lying down, if you're going to start from the top and cut down, the weight of the log's going to fall in your bar and jam your bar. So some people prefer to cut up, and doing that, it's a bit more advanced, but it can be done. But you've got to make sure, as I say again, that it's away from your shoulder angle, and if it does flick back or you lose it, that's not going to maim you in any way.
And if you're in that situation, you're chewing away, and suddenly the bar gets nipped, and it can happen quite quickly sometimes, can't it?
Definitely.
How do you get yourself out of that without chopping your leg off or damaging your saw?
Well, another thing with safety procedures too is, and if you're working on a site, one of them is you always have your vehicle parked and facing towards the exit for getting yourself off site. And if you are not too experienced with using chainsaws, it does pay to have another person around just in case you come to grief, or have a cell phone ready, just general things like that. So I think that's pretty much it. You always got to make sure you've got firm footing until you get experience and you can walk along logs and limb logs up, things like that. Because then, I've worked on sites when we've had loggers in with big machines that have hoists that winches that actually winch 7-ton logs that get them out of the way. So you've got to make sure that your surroundings are always safe. Some people prefer to wear high visibility vests when they're working with other people. Operation procedures, a lot of it is common sense. Like, as I say, you don't want to go right down to your bar when you're operating it to see what you're doing. You're just got to be sensible about things.
Just use that head and think ahead of it. Well, that's really great. Thanks, Ryan. I'm sure that, we've all picked up a tip or two out of that, and hopefully we'll. There's nothing like a good sharp saw, is there? So.
No, exactly. Yep. Fantastic.